For nearly a century, millions of homes relied on a kitchen appliance that needed no electricity at all. It was called the icebox, a heavy cabinet packed with blocks of ice delivered right to your door, quietly keeping milk, meat, and leftovers cold. Then, within just a few decades, it vanished. The ice deliveries stopped, the cabinets disappeared, and the icebox, once essential to everyday life, was replaced by a machine that made its own cold. Here's how the icebox worked, why every home depended on it, and what caused it to disappear. Before electric refrigerators were common in every home, people relied on a very different kind of cooling machine. An icebox was a compact, non-mechanical cabinet used to keep food cold and fresh in an era where electricity-powered refrigeration didn't yet exist. These devices were common in kitchens from the mid-19th century through the early 20th century, and in many homes, they served the same role that electric fridges would later take over. These cabinets were typically made of wood lined with tin or zinc and insulated with materials like cork, sawdust, or straw. A large block of ice was placed in a compartment at the top of the box, and as it slowly melted, the cold air moved downward, chilling the shelves and food below without electricity. People who used these cooling cabinets had to replenish the ice regularly, even having fresh blocks delivered by an iceman whose wagon made rounds throughout the neighborhoods. They emptied the meltwater collected in trays or pans and then replaced the ice. In the US, a large share of households owned iceboxes well into the 20th century, and how they worked was an interesting system. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. We all thank you for your continued support. Most homes depended on the icebox, and at the heart of that system was the iceman and his deliveries. Ice wasn't made in factories back then, but it was harvested from frozen lakes and rivers in winter using saws and stored in insulated ice houses packed with sawdust or straw so it could last into the warmer months. From those ice houses, enormous blocks of ice were loaded onto hose-drawn wagons, or later trucks, and delivered door to door to households that needed fresh ice to chill their food. Customers often placed a small sign in their window, signaling the iceman how much ice they wanted that day, 25, 50, or more pounds, and he would stop by on his regular route to drop off a fresh block. At the kitchen, the household ice block was lifted with heavy tongs and placed into the top compartment of the icebox, where it slowly melted while cooling the air inside the insulated cabinet. Cool air naturally sank through the interior, keeping milk, eggs, meat, and leftover cold for a day or two at a time, and the meltwater collected in a drip pan that had to be emptied regularly. Because ice melted quickly during warm water, many families got deliveries every few days, making the arrival of the iceman a regular part of life. In fact, with most people needing ice boxes, this became a major money-making industry of that time. The ice industry was a huge part of everyday life and commerce, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The iceman was all that customers could see, but it grew out of a much larger commercial trade that harvested ice from frozen lakes and rivers and sold it far beyond where it was cut. The seasonal work of cutting ice in winter became a significant industry. By the late 1800s, the U.S. ice trade employed tens of thousands of workers and was capitalized at millions of dollars. In today's terms, that would be hundreds of millions, with ice houses holding hundreds of thousands of tons of ice ready for summer distribution. Large natural ice companies like the Knickerbocker Ice Company in New York helped shape the business, using innovations in harvesting and storage to expand operations. They built massive ice houses insulated to store blocks of ice through warm weather, then shipped it by rail, barge, or wagon to cities, businesses, and households. In some regions, the commercial harvests involved thousands of men cutting, stacking, and packing ice. Several thousand workers alone might be involved in harvesting and supplying ice to all residents. It wasn't only limited to the residential kitchens. Ice was used in meatpacking, brewing, shipping perishable goods, and the early cold chain. Commercial ice wagons delivered blocks that families put into their ice boxes, and the iceman became a familiar figure on neighborhood streets. Ice boxes were as ordinary in kitchens as stoves and sinks, and daily life adapted around them. These insulated cabinets, made of wood and lined with metal, held a large block of ice at the top that slowly melted and cooled the food below, keeping milk, meat, and leftovers fresh longer than older preservation methods ever could. The ice was constantly melting, so members of the household had regular chores tied to the ice box, including emptying the drip pan underneath to catch meltwater, arranging perishable items on the coldest shelves, and communicating with the ice delivery service to make sure they never ran out of cooling capacity. In many homes, space and design reflected this routine. There's a small exterior door or ice hatch that led to the kitchen so the iceman could deliver fresh blocks of ice without disturbing the family inside. All customers had to do was leave a card or sign in their window, showing how much ice they needed, and the iceman on his horse-drawn wagon or truck would stop by on his daily or every few days route to drop off the requested blocks. The term icebox was so popular that even when electric refrigerators emerged, they were still called iceboxes. As long as it was a box that kept food cold, it was an icebox. But the icebox in the traditional sense began to disappear from kitchens, first with the emergence of refrigerators. At the beginning of the 20th century, a new technology began appearing in a small number of homes, and that was the electric refrigerator. Unlike iceboxes, which depended on blocks of ice delivered every few days, these machines used a motor and compressor to produce cold automatically. Early versions of these refrigerators started appearing in the 1910s, including one of the first household electric refrigerators introduced around 1913 to 1914, which replaced the block of ice with a mechanical cooling unit. But at first, refrigerators were far more expensive than the iceboxes they were meant to replace. In the 1920s, a typical electric refrigerator cost between $200 and $600, a price equal to several $1,000s today. That meant the earliest buyers were mostly wealthy households, while most families continued relying on the familiar iceboxes. Still, the appeal of electric refrigeration was obvious. A refrigerator didn't require ice deliveries, didn't leak meltwater, and kept food at a more consistent temperature. Manufacturers were constantly improving the technology and reducing the prices through mass production. Companies like Kelvinator, Frigidaire, and General Electric competed to build more reliable machines and make them affordable for ordinary homes. A major turning point came in 1927 when General Electric introduced its widely known monitor top refrigerator, which was one of the models to become popular with consumers. Though still expensive, it showed that electric refrigeration could work reliably inside the home and operate as a single self-contained appliance in the kitchen. In the 1930s and 1940s, there were two reasons that spread the use of refrigeration. There were falling prices and expanding household electricity. More homes were wired for power, and refrigerators gradually became affordable for middle-class families. By 1944, about 85% of American households had a refrigerator, a dramatic shift from just a few decades earlier when the icebox dominated kitchens. Within a generation, the appliance that once depended on ice deliveries and neighborhood icemen was replaced by a machine that plugged into the wall and ran continuously. But the emergence of refrigerators isn't the only reason why iceboxes faded from use. In the early 20th century, the decision between an icebox and an electric refrigerator often came down to two things: cost and convenience. An icebox itself was relatively inexpensive, as many sold for around $15 to $50 depending on size and quality. But owning one meant paying for ice deliveries again and again. Households usually bought blocks of ice every few days, especially in warm weather, and the cost added up over time. A 100-pound block of ice might cost around 25 cents in the 1920s, and families needed it constantly to keep food cold. Aside from the cost of ice, there was also the daily work that came with maintaining an icebox. The ice slowly melted, so someone had to empty the drip pan, wipe up condensation, and rearrange food so the cold air from the melting ice kept perishables from spoiling. Deliveries had to be scheduled or requested with window cards so the iceman knew how much ice to drop off. For households, refrigeration wasn't automatic. It was a small but constant routine built into everyday life. Electric refrigerators changed that equation. The early machines were expensive, which meant many families could not afford them right away. But once installed, the refrigerator removed many of the ongoing hassles of the icebox. There were no deliveries to coordinate, no melting ice to manage, and no daily maintenance aside from plugging it in and keeping it clean. Families realized that while a refrigerator cost more upfront, it simplified daily life and reduced dependence on the ice delivery system that kitchens had relied on for decades. The shift from the icebox to refrigerator was not only about the cost, but also about the relationship that households had with their kitchens. Going from iceboxes to refrigerators also changed how people thought about food and daily life. Before refrigeration, food had to be managed carefully because it spoiled quickly. Families bought meat, milk, and produce in small amounts, and often shopped almost every day because there was no reliable way to keep perishables for long periods. Meals were planned around what would spoil first, and preserving food through salting, pickling, or canning was a routine part of household work. Electric refrigerators changed that almost instantly. With a constant low temperature inside the kitchen, households could store fresh food for days or even weeks, something that had never been possible with the same reliability before. Grocery shopping shifted from daily trips to once-a-week purchases, and leftovers became a normal part of household eating rather than something that had to be consumed immediately or thrown away. The refrigerator also gave more options regarding what people could eat and when they could eat it. Fruits, vegetables, dairy, and meat could now be stored safely for longer periods, which meant diets were more varied and less dependent on what was available in the current season. Since food could now be kept fresh, it encouraged the growth of supermarkets and modern food distribution, as perishable goods could now travel longer distances before reaching consumers. As ice boxes began to disappear from kitchens, the entire industry that had existed for decades disappeared. For much of the 19th and 20th century, the natural ice trade was a massive business. In fact, at its peak, millions of tons of ice were cut every winter and shipped across cities and regions. In fact, some local economies depended on the seasonal work of cutting, hauling, storing, and delivering ice. The most visible workers in this system were the icemen. The delivery workers sometimes drive wagons with more than 100 pounds of ice and deliver them directly into household ice boxes. It was physically demanding work that required strength and endurance, but it also made icemen familiar figures in many communities. Families knew the iceman by name, and the deliveries were part of the rhythm of daily life in cities and towns. But when refrigerators spread around homes and the aftermath of World War II emerged, demand for natural ice began to collapse. Ice deliveries became unnecessary, and the system that supported them started to disappear. Ice companies that had once harvested and stored massive quantities of frozen water found their business shrinking rapidly. Some tried to adapt by producing artificial ice in factories, but many could not compete with the convenience of home refrigeration. Ice houses were abandoned or converted for other uses, and the large natural ice harvests that had once defined winter labor gradually came to an end. Thousands of people lost their jobs, businesses collapsed, and the ice industry was no more. But there's a new type of industry today, which relies on a more complex network based on technology, from home refrigerators to cold rooms. Although ice boxes vanished, the ice industry has transformed into something far larger and more complex. Today, ice is no longer cut from frozen lakes and delivered by horse-drawn wagons. Instead, it is produced in industrial ice plants, packaged in bags or blocks, and distributed through a modern refrigerated supply chain that reaches supermarkets, restaurants, fisheries, and shipping companies. Machineries now freeze thousands of pounds of ice every day, producing cubes, flakes, or crushed ice depending on the needs of different industries. But the biggest change is the rise of the cold chain, a global system designed to keep perishable goods cold from the moment they are produced until they reach consumers. Food is stored in massive refrigerated warehouses, sometimes containing millions of cubic feet of temperature-controlled space, where meat, seafood, vegetables, and frozen products can be kept safely for a long period. Large companies now operate hundreds of these facilities around the world, and this has become the backbone of modern food distribution. Transportation has changed as well. Instead of wagons carrying ice through neighborhoods, modern logistics uses refrigerated trucks and shipping containers equipped with their own cooling systems. These vehicles maintain precise temperatures while transporting food across cities, countries, or even continents. Refrigerated trailers can move everything from dairy and frozen meals to pharmaceuticals while keeping them at stable temperatures during transit. Ice itself still plays an important role in many industries. Fisheries pack fresh catches in ice to slow spoilage. Restaurants use ice for food storage and beverages. And shipping companies use specialized ice forms like slurry ice, a mixture of tiny ice crystals suspended in liquid that cools products more efficiently than traditional ice blocks. So, the modern ice industry still exists, but it looks nothing like the world of icemen and neighborhood deliveries. Ice boxes were once a necessity in every home, especially if a family wanted to store food and chilled water for a long time. Did you ever use an ice box or at least see one? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed watching, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and drop us a note in the comments letting us know what you want to see us do next.